Emma prospered after that, and anyone I met who vaccinated their babies, I was very happy, saying, I'm glad you're vaccinating because whooping cough's a terrible thing. Anyone who didn't vaccinate, I had strong words with them. You see, when I was in hospital, the nurses told me that my baby had whooping cough because there are people out there who don't vaccinate. And so that's what I thought. So when my next baby was born, I certainly took steps to know more about natural birth. And I was able to have a laborieux birth with that baby, which is a French doctor who you give birth to the baby in dull lights, and then the baby you put into warm water as soon as it's born. And I certainly loved that laborieux birth. This baby was a little different. I easily calmed him. I guess I had that bonding from birth with him. I certainly believe that I was able to regain that through breastfeeding Emma. My second child was a boy. His name was James. And James prospered very well. Emma was only 18 months when he was born. I was very happy with my new baby and my little Emma. She certainly hadn't looked back since she'd recovered from her whooping cough. When James was 2.5 months old, I took him straight to the doctor to be vaccinated. James reacted. He reacted very badly. He just screamed for hours, and the site where he'd been injected was raised 1/2 inch and was the size of almost a grapefruit. It was very difficult. When it was time for his 4-month vaccine, I took him to the doctor. And I said to the doctor, he reacted so badly last time. And the doctor said, well, we'll eliminate the whooping cough part because that's usually the injection that they react to. I was starting to have questions now. About this time, Emma got an earache. I took her to the doctor. She was put on antibiotics. When she finished the antibiotics, the earache came back. This went on over 6 weeks and 4 courses of antibiotics later. This was not what I wanted. I was a back-to-nature hippie lifestyle, and my daughter had had so many drugs. People say, don't play with the ears. You must take her to the doctor. So I went back to the doctor, and I said to him as he's writing the 5th course of antibiotics, I said, will my daughter be on antibiotics for the rest of her life? I'm beginning to come to that conclusion. He was challenged by my question. He said, I'll send you to an ear, nose and throat specialist. I went to an ear, nose and throat specialist. He looked in Emma's ears. He looked in Emma's mouth. He said, the child's teething. Give her these drops to keep the eustachian tubes clear. I did, and she got no more earaches. Let's fast forward to James is now 18 months. James gets an earache. I don't take him to the doctor. I remember my last experience, but what do? I must do something. So I went to the old lady next door. I was about 26. She was about 86. I said, what did you do when you were a little girl? What did your mother do when you had an earache? She said, Mum would steam up an onion on the stove. I went straight home. I steamed up an onion on the stove. I wrapped it in a cloth. I put it against James' ear when it was the right temperature. He was being breastfed, so it was easy. I put him in my arm, and my arm was touching the onion and touching his ear, so I could tell if it was the right temperature. James fell asleep. I laid him on a thick towel on the onion, so the towel kept the onion warm. James slept for 2 hours. When James woke up, James was happy. I kept following him around. I couldn't believe it. 1 onion poultice compared to 6 weeks and 4 courses of antibiotics with my last experience with Emma. I was so excited. My partner wasn't sure. Whenever James would cry, and little 2-year-olds cry sometimes, he said, I'm sure it's that ear. So I took him back to the doctor. The doctor looked in his ears. The ear that had been sore was perfectly clean. The ear that hadn't had the earache. He said there's a little bit of wax in that one. So I came home so happy that I was discovering ways to treat the body when it got ill without drug medication. So I got a little book, ABCDEFG on the Edge. My first writing in that book was under E for ear. It was a onion poultice. Then I got herb books, and I started to get some hydrotherapy books. I began to investigate natural methods of healing. I'd never heard of natural methods of healing, and I was excited to find so much. About that time, we had a couple move next door to us where we were living. It was in Dora Creek, which is near Cooranbong. They were Seventh-day Adventists. She started to share with me. She was my age. Her name was Sue and Mark. Mark was in the college doing ministry. They'd just become Seventh-day Adventists themselves. They were back to nature hippie lifestylers too. And that's when I discovered the writings of Ellen White. And I discovered that the Seventh-day Adventists are vegetarian. They have a health message. When I began to read their books, my heart melted. I read one book that explained Jesus' ministry, how he came and died that we might live. I surrendered my heart to God through that reading of those books, and I became a Christian. Now I wanted to know God's method of healing in the human body, and I was not disappointed. About this time, my partner and I moved up to the rainforest. When we moved to the rainforest, I just had my third child. My third child was a home birth, so I was really looking at alternate ways of birth too.